what's up. Glass, that's what's up. You, that's what's up. Me, that's what's up. Right now, that's what's up. Brooklyn, you know what's up. We keep it gapped, so like a plastic cup. Fantastic. 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 Say fat, we say what, you know, this is yeah, you know, this is for y'all to get down right now, 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 right now. The R's magnetic, the flow athletic, dimensions are effective, whether static or kinetic. It's power past pressure, mass beyond measure. You can place him wherever he best style forever. The fresh get fresher, yes, endeavor, the Flacco endeavor, and yes, a pure pleasure to rock. Your pleasure for the pleasure that up. Speed it up and break it down like ever you want. I ride around so expedient. Every show you see me in deep concentration, and yes, a pure pleasure to rock. For the pleasure that up, speed it up and break it down like ever you want. So we can roll with the rockers like ever it come. And that's for nobody special and for everyone. I ride around so expedient. Every show you see me in deep concentration. Old school Brooklyn R's magnetic flow, athletic dimensions are effective, static or kinetic in its power. Back pressure, mass beyond measure. You can place him wherever he best style forever. The fresh, yes, endeavor, the Flacco endeavor, yes, pure pleasure to rock. For the pleasure that up, I speed it up and break it down like ever you want, so we can roll and like ever it come. And that's for nobody special and for everyone. I ride around so expedient. Every show you see me in deep concentration. Old school Brooklyn art, magnetic flow, athletic dimensions are effective, static or kinetic in its power. Past pressure, mass beyond measure. You can face him wherever he best style forever. The fresh get fresher, yes, endeavor, the Flacco endeavor, yes, pure pleasure to rock. For the pleasure that up, to speed it up and break it down like ever you want, so we can roll with the rockers like ever it come. And that's for nobody's special, never everyone. I ride around so it's immediate. Every show you see me in deep concentration. Home school, Brooklyn. And that's what's up. That's what's up. Now somebody, anybody, everybody. The man liberator, the death operator, rock potato. The man liberator, the death operator, amazing flavor. Yup, the way y'all feel, the time is too hard to sit still. Things are so passionate, times are so real. Sometimes I try to chill, mellow down, blow a smoke, a smile on my face, it's really no joke. You feel it in the street that people breathe without hope. They going through the motion, dimming down the focus get clear, then the light turns sharp and the eyes get teary. The mind grow weary, I speak it so clearly, sometimes y'all don't hear me. I push it past the bass note, nations got to feel me. I feel it in my bones, I'm so wide awake that I'm hardly ever sleep. My love forever deep, in this volume of scriptures when I breathe on a beat. My presence speak volume before I say a word. I'm everywhere, penthouse, pavement, and curb. Cradle to the grave, so for Legion of Rochelle, universal kid of life, holla black, you know it well. Quiet storm vital form, pen pushed it right across. Mine is a vital force, high lower right across. Soul is the lion's your voice is the siren. I swing round, ring out, and bring down the tyrant. Chop a small axe and knock a giant lopsided. The world is so dangerous, there's no need for frighten. The suckers trying to hide like the sugar won't find them. Sun bust through the cloud, declare they remind them it's everywhere. Plant house, pavement, and curb. Cradle to the grave, so all these universal, universal killer like holla black. You know what it is, you know, they know what it is. We know, y'all know what it is. Ecstatic, here it is. What it is, you know, we know what it is. They know, y'all know what it is. You know, here it is. What it is, you know, we know what it is. They know, y'all know what it is. Yeah. What it is. Jean, 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 Jean.
And maybe we have like everybody on the public side. Hold on 1 second. Let me add one. Oh, I got Wanda on here. All right, boss man. So we have so I sent it to one.
Tripping off the beat, kinda dripping off the meat, grind the heat, niner stripping, pimping, so sweet, minus. I know it's a neat sign of trouble with the script, digits, double dip, bubble lip, subtlest, mention, borderline, sort of fine, quarter grind, quarter wine, put a line, let's go. Ever since 10, 11, glad he made a brother. Then his last down 7, alligator 7, at the gates of heaven, knocking, no answer. Hopeless romancer, dopeless flow stances, yes, no. Metal face of destro, yes, yo, still incredible at escrow. Just say yo, I'll test the yo. Wild West, style fest, y'all best to lay low. Hey yo. Set the debt paid over before the check to get away. Better get paid. The most hated God, the perpetrated odd favors demonstrated in the perforated raw labors. In all quad flavors, Lord save us. Still back in the game like Jack LaLanne. Thinking on the name, don't rack your brain. Don't rack your brain. back in the game like Jack LaLanne. Thinking on the name, don't rock your brain. Still back in the game like Jack LaLanne. Thinking on the name, don't rack your brain. On the fast track to have insane. Whether a slow blow or act, the speed or rap, the game, laughter, pain. Doing bomb hits in the booth with the best host. He's at it again, mad at the pen. A tad fat and a bad head for men. Brain and cinnamon, Manhattan warmongers. You can find the villain in satin. Congas. The van screeches, the cold hand reaches, the old man reaches, the cold hand reaches. The van creases, the old man preaches of the gold sand beaches, the cold hand reaches. The van screeches, the old man preaches of the gold sand beaches, the cold hand reaches for the old tan delicious. The van screeches, the old man preaches of the gold sand beaches, the cold hand reaches for the old tan delicious.
So this is me talking through the Zoom right now. So if they have anything to say, they can say it. I would suggest turning the volume down just a little bit because it's super hot. Maybe that's on my end. Turn it down just a little bit. Hello, hello, hello. Check, check, check. Two, two, two. Even if I do it from here, that's gonna be feedback.
How do I turn the volume down? So what I'm gonna do is I can keep everybody muted.
Radio sucker never play me. Triple straight up like that, my bleach shit never fade me. They say he crazy, New York raised them in the 80s, killer catch administration, gangster renovation, born in isolation, Asian ill
No, we're good.
communication,
So try to unmute yourself.
got me sold.
You can't.
Radio sucker never play me.
Perfect. So what I just did was what I'm gonna do.
They say
I'm gonna
he
leave it
crazy, New York
muted.
raised them in the 80s, killer catch administration, gangster renovation, born in isolation, Asian ill communication, Asian marble, fiber optic, pestilential microscopic, soul sonic remedy, clinic right in the street, operating in the dark, surgery with the heart, come together, pill apart, come together, smoke on a something good, praying for something better, from out of better, never rocking for forever, ever, 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 warm blooded, cold gun money, the chief rocker through the chicken, Zulu horsepower, the buggy,
Which email? Oh, here we go.
Yes, you're rocking with the death, you're rocking with the fresh, you're rocking with the best, you are rocking with the yes. Now you are rocking with the best, you're rocking with the death, you are rocking with the fresh, the yes, you are rocking with the best, you are rocking with the fresh, you are rocking with the death, you are rocking with the yes. Now you are rocking with the best, you're rocking with the fresh, you are rocking with the death, the yes. Zulu, big bird flying down in the mountain pass. Only thing to survive the crash. Black radio. You wanna fly free, go far and fast. Built to last, we made this craft. From black radio, black radio, black radio. Black radio. Yo, black radio.
I'm on stage. Hey, let me get you back on stage.
Black radio.
Alright, well look. Let's get ready to jump in my thing too. So. Hold on a second. What'd you say, Q? On me, Hayti? Just for a test. Alright, boss lady. Crush the podcast. I'm gonna crush this and I'll get you back. Alright, I'll talk to you. Absolutely, she's famous. So this is famous Sue Solo. She's actually like a legit famous person.
Oh my goodness. Let me go back and put the good.
I know, man. I was like, wow. All right, boss lady. All right, bud. So she's like just like all podcast, radio personality. You're a director.
I've heard of that, yeah.
Yeah, part of like that.
Oh, that cool.
Q, you got it settled.
She's no challenge to my eye. None whatsoever.
I know, right? Neither mine.
Matter of fact, she calls back, let me know.
I gotta hang up.
I got to make sure Wanda got her money.
She did.
She didn't want to have hers.
Yeah, she accepted.
Cool, cool. Look, that covers me.
I hear you, man. I hear you. So Q, should I should I make you a host? I should remain a host with this laptop up? Alright, bet. And that way.
Two, two, three, 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 four, four. Check, check.
I think y'all should be good.
Check, check.
Yep. And you have the computer, right? You're gonna do the slides. All right, sweet.
So Tom. So when you talk, I'm gonna do the slides for you. Oh, they're all. Oh, you're running back. So right now, I just have this as a placeholder.
Mayor, is there a community development corporation in this footprint, CDC?
Well, yeah, the one I have, the CDC.
You have a CDC?
It's countywide.
No, I'm talking about in
Just
this
in the city.
neighborhood.
No,
Just this neighborhood. Nothing.
no, I can't think of. No.
So you looked out for this neighborhood.
Well, the whole county, really.
But when I see the McCormick Fair in the element,
Oh, well, see,
that's a significant
I did that when I was mayor.
No, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. We did
I remember you telling me.
We did 3 developments. I like that.
Yeah, I I went down to the St. Louis site, and I went to what you did in New Orleans.
I put that together.
Oh, really?
I was on the board of the community organization. Harmony. It was called Harmony Inc.
Yeah. My wife's from New Orleans.
And that was Harmony.
Yeah,
So I worked with a woman named Una Anderson. You might have tall woman. She ran the neighborhood with that.
Okay.
And it was the CJP, public
So I didn't
housing.
know, so you were involved with that?
I was involved.
Yeah, that's when
I
you
called
went-
Richard up. I called 3 developers up. This was right after Katrina. And I said, would you all think about coming down here and looking at this with the neighborhood? And 2 of them said,
Should we do it now?
they didn't want to get near New Orleans. Right? And the mayor Megan, I was working with. Right? He was up for the jail.
Yeah, I know. Just got out.
I felt bad. I liked it, but
Ray was a different technique.
he just didn't want to get engaged in it. I mean, it was funny because I worked under Bill Close, and I worked with the group with Harry Barber.
Okay.
And it was so funny. Harry Barber, conservative Republican, he was a real leader, making things happen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Keep it short.
I was going to go through something I have was
What's that?
senior resident fellow.
You don't need to say Kayla Zero. Don't
Good
worry
evening.
about Kayla Zero, please. Just say senior road and former mayor Pittsburgh.
Hello, everybody. We don't want to keep you all longer than we have to, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I am Angela Lee, the Executive and Artistic Director here at the Hayti Heritage Center, and I deeply appreciate all of you being with us tonight as we present the Urban Land Institute Advisory Services Panel's final report. I want to take a moment to thank everyone who's been involved with this committee and all of you who came out when we did the interviews in May, and for you being here tonight. I also want to recognize Casimir Brown, who's a member of the St. Joseph's Historic Foundation Board of Directors, and we thank him for his support. And he often talks about growing up and attending church in this space when St. Joseph's was here. So again, thank you, and at this time I want to introduce Bill Bell, former mayor of Durham, who has served on this committee and has been very instrumental in us being here tonight. Mayor Bell.
Thank you. Thank you, Angela. I just want to give a little bit of a history of the genesis of this project and how it came about. I was on part of the affordable housing committee that Duke University's community development area, Stephanie Williams and Mamie Webb. And there were various segments that we had of that program. And at one of the sessions, somehow the issue about Fayetteville Street came up. Well, what's going to happen to Fayetteville Street? And I opened my mouth and said, well, if you ever go do anything about Fayetteville Street, now's the time to do it. And they said, okay, you go do it. So it didn't quite work out that way, but that was the net of it. But we came back and had some further discussion about it. And Charles Robinson, Michael Page, Keith Chadwell, John Hodges Koppel, and I'm probably leaving out some names, but a very small group. And what we wanted to look at as well, Fayetteville Street is a pretty large street. And what we wanted to do was try to work on something that we thought was manageable. And obviously, NCC is a key part of what's happening along the Fayetteville Street corridor. I had some conversations with the chancellor, and he thought it was a good idea somehow that Central should be involved. He assigned Michael Page to be the liaison person from Central. So we wanted to have some earmark, not just Fayetteville Street, but what we decided was to go no further south than where the NCCU New Student Senate was. And we would hit corridors on each side of Fayetteville Street. And so that's what you see in the map, the border lines. John Hodges Koppel was very instrumental in pulling this map together for us. And while we were having a discussion, Nicole Thompson from downtown Durham, I don't know if Nicole's here or not. And initially we were talking about stopping right at 147. And she said, well, you know, why stop at 147? Why not come across 147? Because the city would have an interest also. So that's why you see the lines going across 147 expressway. And again, what I want to emphasize, we weren't trying to focus on any particular piece of property. Of course, we've heard a lot about Fayette Place. We know that the Hesters have a large block of property in this area also, but we were just trying to define an area that we wanted to work towards and spend our time working on. So as we began that discussion, then we said, well, you know, who can really help come in and lead this type of an effort? And I guess everybody really thought about the Urban Land Institute. And quite frankly, when we started talking about the Urban Land Institute, we were talking about them doing a smaller type of evaluation. And then we said, we really need to have the full strength of the ULI and working at this. And as a result, Charles Robinson had conversations with the management at ULI, and what you'll find out is that they agreed to come in. I'm not going to steal any of Tom's thunder, he can explain all that. But he decided to come in, and the other reason we were concerned, it was about the money. I mean, initially when we were talking about a project, it was about $27,000. And we said, if we're going to do something larger with ULI, it's probably going to be more money than that. And it was more money, it was like $125,000. So we were fortunate we had a good pitch man that came in and had a conversation with ULI, and the net of it is they came in and gave us a grant to do that project. So while we're talking about a project that really totaled, I guess, close to $160,000 when you look at all the other contributions that were made, ULI came in and did the study for us for their grant for $125,000. And you're going to hear the details of that. But again, we weren't trying to recreate the universe on Federal Street Corridor. We know a lot of work has been done on the Federal Street Corridor, but we just thought this was an appropriate time to begin looking at it in a holistic way, but also with some professionals that came in and were unbiased and could come in and give us a very objective evaluation of what they thought we could do. So I'm going to stop now, and I'm going to turn it over to Charles, and Charles can carry it forward, and we bring Tom up. Tom.
So Charles Robinson here. As Mayor Bell, there's a lot of people behind the scenes that's been contributing to making this happen, and I just want to take this chance to introduce Tom Murphy. He was part of the ULI panel. But first, let me introduce myself, Charles Robinson with Robinson Capital Group, and proud resident of Durham, North Carolina, and excited to be a part of this group with Hayti being the sponsor. So with Tom is the senior residence fellow for ULI and also the former mayor of Pittsburgh. He wanted me to keep it short and sweet because he wanted to have a few words with you guys. So I want to pass it over to Tom.
You already mentioned Hayti. Why Hayti?
Yeah. I'm gonna let Bill mention why Hayti because there's a specific reason.
We talked about trying to put this together. The next question, well, who's going to lead this type of an effort? And we wanted to be someone that had credibility, someone that had a vested interest in this area. So we looked to the Hayti Center, and I gave Angela a call and sort of explained to her what we were attempting to do. And if we were going to have ULI involved, there needed to be a sponsor. So we were looking for Hayti to be the sponsor, explained it to Angela, and she stepped up, and as a result, Hayti is really sponsoring this effort through ULI. So I didn't want to miss that piece in terms of why we were here and why we were Hayti and really who is the sponsor for the project that ULI has come into this town to do the study with.
Thanks, Bill, and that's absolutely the case. We just supporting Hayti and making sure that we add the support to make sure that this comes across the finish line. So without further ado, I want Tom to come across, and he'll be able to explain further the report that you guys will be able to see.
Thanks. Good evening. Thank you for being here, and I'm honored to be here. It's nice to be invited back after you've made recommendations, and I've developed a real affection for this whole neighborhood, having spent a week here running through it every day and getting a feel for it. It's worth fighting for. not only because of the history, but the opportunity it presents. And that's in part what the ULI panel talked about. I'm going to go over quickly, and I'm summarizing what the panel recommendations have made. This book is available. You can get it online. Angela might have some copies here if you want a hard copy, but I'm just going to summarize it, but it will give you some sense of what we did in a week. So why don't we start? Charles, are you controlling this? So let me first tell you a little bit about what ULI is. The Urban Land Institute has been around since 1938. And it was started by a group of developers concerned about the development happening in America at the time. And it's fast forward, there were about 50,000 members worldwide, and we're a nonprofit group. We don't lobby, and we're not political. We work, really our mission is to build thriving communities and help people understand both from the development side, and so ULI's membership is very diverse. It's developers, it's people that finance real estate, it's architects, it's public officials, it's a host of people. And we publish a lot of things. I left a couple books here called Legacy Cities that looks at 20 cities that have successfully turned themselves around, Pittsburgh being one of them, from being a city that lost their economy to they figured out how to become something else. And that's in one way what you're trying to do right now here. So we publish a lot of books, and one of the other things we do are advisory service panels. And we get invited by somebody. It could be a government, it could be a private group, it could be a public developer, and we come in. You can go on, Charles. We come in, and in this case, go back, in this case, Hayti Heritage Center, the St. Joseph Historic Foundation, and the ULI Foundation contributed money. We all, when we come, volunteer our time, but we got to pay for the hotels and everything like that. Go ahead. And we want to particularly thank all of these people also who helped while we were here for the week and being interviewed and so typically we come, we get a series of questions. Go ahead. These are the people. As you can see, we're from all over the country. There are 8 of us. Many of us have never met each other before. We come together, and for a week, we work together. We throw things at each other, and we interview people, and we come to a conclusion. And on Friday morning, we made a presentation, and what you're going to see is a synopsis of that. And so these were the questions we were asked. It was really about that Fayetteville corridor, as Mayor Barr said, about what, and these are the questions that were asked, and these are in the book if you want to look at them in detail, but it really is about what are the opportunities and how do we change what is there now to build on sort of our history and on what the opportunities are. Go ahead. And this is the corridor, really. This was the map that our clients drew for us to take a look at. Obviously includes the university, which is a very important part of this conversation. Go ahead. And so what we left, I mean, what we really clearly saw, we heard from people, we interviewed, I don't know, about 60 or 70 people probably, and talking to our sponsors, a real sense of urgency, and we share that there's a moment in time that you have an opportunity to fix what was done badly 60 years or 70 years ago, and to build on the history, but also to build on the opportunities that are here now. So go ahead. And so we saw the pressure. Why the urgency? Because I can look across that highway, which maybe many of you do every day, and even on this side of the highway, the hotel we saw it in. You don't need to be a genius to see where development is coming. And it is true in lots of cities in America, the development will move to where the lowest cost property is. And so this whole area is probably facing a challenging future unless you begin to think about how you want to see it happen in a different kind of way. Go ahead. And so the other is this is a moment in time when there's lots of money available. There is billions of dollars available from the federal government to right the wrong of what highways did, and we had experience in Pittsburgh, and I was in Tulsa a couple weeks ago that not only was there the Tulsa massacre in their Black Wall Street, but then 40 years later, they put a highway through that neighborhood, and very much like what you saw here in the 60s. And so there's billions of dollars of federal money to figure out how to redo that or try to re-knit the community together. You ought to be in the front of the line for that with the story that you have to tell. And how that happens and how you make that happen really is what we want to talk about. And then the issue of Fayetteville Street and how that can be improved from this sort of an it'll-do kind of street that I'm going to drive through and not think about much, and you know, a dozen or so vacant buildings there boarded up. What a terrible entrance to a great university. And to a neighborhood with the kind of history you have. And so you got to think about what's the urgency that we're going to say, we're not going to live with this anymore like this. We want to think about it in a different kind of way. And so we talked about with the urgency is that what we want to do is improve Fayetteville Street, strengthen the North Carolina Central University, invest in the Hayti Heritage Center, subsidize property upkeep and taxes for legacy homeowners. So how do you continue to have this as an affordable neighborhood in the face of the kind of housing pressures that continue? How do you launch a flexible capital fund that will help entrepreneurs to invest in this neighborhood so that you have good retail that can serve the university students and the community generally? Go ahead. Go ahead, you can go on, Charles. Oh, you can keep moving. Uh-oh. So we're stuck. Okay, so we really, what the next, so what we thought about is how do you change that narrative from sort of it'll do kind of what we're living with right now to something different? And I'm going to give you a couple of examples of cities just south of you that have done this very thing. Go ahead. How many of you have been to Greenville, South Carolina? Do you know the story? It's a remarkable downtown. So if you look at your right or your left, that bridge went across that waterfall. It was a 4-lane state highway bridge, and it went through right the middle of Greenville. And it had 4 lanes, no parking on either side, and narrow sidewalks. All the storefronts were vacant because you couldn't even stop there. And the mayor, a few years ago, about 15 or 20 years ago, said, this is killing our city. And so he proposed tearing that bridge down and taking the road that runs through the middle of Greenville, and if you've been on their main street, you know what it looks like, narrowing it down to 1 lane each way, putting the best sidewalks in I've ever seen anywhere with the landscaping. And people would say, I mean, it was very controversial, and people said, but how are we going to get through Greenville? And he said, that's the issue. I don't want you to go through Greenville. I want you to stay here. And think about it. And if you've been to Greenville now lately, you know that bridge, that highway bridge is gone, and that park where that waterfall is just packed with people on a nice summer day because it's right in the middle of the city. So it was a city that made a decision in a very intentional way about reimagining itself. When you leave here tonight, that's what I want you to think about. How do you reimagine this neighborhood? Not the Fayetteville Street that you see today, but what could it be? And there are models of this all over the country. And so another example is in Charleston, South Carolina. How many of you have been to Charleston? You know, Charleston was destroyed about 30 or 40 years ago, largely damaged with a hurricane hitting it. And there was a big debate about maybe it's time to tear down all these historic houses and modernize Charleston. And there was a young guy named Joe Riley who had just become mayor. And he had been mayor he left last year, 2 years ago. He was mayor for 40 years. And historic preservation, rather than seen as a liability and not of getting in the way of modernizing Charleston, he made a decision it was going to define Charleston. And it was in a very intentional way, he began to protect the historic buildings. As people came and said, we got to tear this down, we want to put a new hotel there or something, Joe said, you're not tearing those buildings down. We'll figure out how to make the hotel work in the buildings. And if you've been to Charleston, you've seen that vision of how they reimagined Charleston in a different kind of way, but using their past, much like you could do, to use your past to build on the history, the remarkable history you have here of shaping a different future for yourself. Go ahead. I could give you lots of examples. That's Charleston. And Pittsburgh is very analogous to you. There was a highway proposed. This is how I get involved in politics, and I ran a neighborhood development organization, and the state had proposed building a highway right through 4 neighborhoods, demolishing hundreds, if not a couple thousand houses. And this one particularly was a neighborhood called Manchester, and we were able to stop that highway. We were able to force the highway department to move it so it wouldn't go through these neighborhoods. This became, shortly after we were able to stop that highway, the largest predominantly African-American National Historic District in the country. Highly recognized by the National Trust for Historic Preservation, which, by the way, just gave Angela an award, a recognition, and give her a hand. And they hired the guy that was the longtime director that I would like to have you guys to hear sometime, Stanley Lowe, about the fight they went through to save these historic houses that were going to be demolished, hundreds of them, and now becoming this remarkably successful neighborhood. So there are stories like this. You need to believe in yourselves that you can make this happen, and you can find great examples all over the country where it's happening. Go ahead. And so this is the map, sort of the significant land uses in the study area we were given. And obviously the university is a major part, and there are some other large landowners within this footprint. Go ahead. But what is scary, this is one block that we looked at in that footprint, and you know where it is. There are 6 vacant houses in a row on Fayetteville Street. And that block is slowly getting bought up by somebody from out of town that lives, I think, in Baltimore. And you can see that. I mean, if that doesn't get you nervous and wake you up, nothing will. That you're watching people speculate in your neighborhood, which is nothing worse in what will happen to your neighborhood. So you need to start understanding how that happens and how you get in front of it. And so go ahead. That's what we began. So it starts with a shared vision. What is it that you want to do? And this is where all of you and maybe some others lock yourselves in a room for a day and come out with what is important. What's the essential pieces that make this neighborhood work again? And that vision it starts with that vision. I hear a lot of people say, well, you know, we'd love to do this and that, but we don't have any money. And I was mayor of one of the flattest broke cities in America. Between 1970 and 90, and I became mayor in 94, we lost half of our population. But we went from a city of 600,000 people to a city of 500,000 or 300,000 people. In the matter of 20 years, we were losing 50,000 people a year, young people. That's why you have so many Steeler fans in Durham, because they were moving here because you were growing. And so we were facing a really uncertain future. But we decided that we needed to reimagine Pittsburgh, not as this steel city, but as a city that would build on technology and other competitive advantages we had. And it required investing money. And people said, but we don't have any money. But we figured it out. And what I learned in that is it's not about the money. That's always an excuse. What it's about is what you want. What's the vision you have, and how do you build the partnerships willing to make that happen? We figured that out in Pittsburgh, and if you've been to Pittsburgh today, you know it's a very different city than what it was 30 years ago. Go ahead. And so that's what we're saying that you need to do. You need to figure out what your vision is. And clearly, a major part of that is what you do here at Hayti, your history, but it's also the university, how they become much more of a partner with this community in intentionally thinking about how to move forward and how do you build that relationship. That's getting everybody in the room and coming out with a plan, a vision of what you want, a strategic vision. And somebody needs to play that leadership role. Maybe it's these two, and Mayor Barr up here, call everybody together. Go ahead. The second thing is the historic preservation. This is, I mean, you have some spectacular buildings on Fayetteville Street. Some of them are boarded up. Shame on you. These are worth saving. And you need to think about how to do that. It's in partnership maybe with the owners. Maybe it's in partnership with some other groups that buy it and restore it. This is a conversation about your history and how you tell that story. And that street is a remarkable opportunity. And that's what you need to think about. That's what your vision is. How do you encompass this? And so and we talk about it as placemaking. You have an opportunity not to have Fayetteville Street be an it'll-do street that people are just driving through and worried a little bit about maybe some of the crime that's along there, but thinking about reimagining what it could be if you fixed the street, made it more attractive, and began to create activities along there that would attract people. Go ahead. So this is the leadership. We talked a lot in the report about leadership, collaboration, and partnerships. Go ahead. And I mentioned the university, clearly part of the leadership, but somebody needs to call the people together and make the decision about how to move forward. And we think this happens through building the relationships that you all have. We were amazed at how everybody knew each other in this room and when we were talking to each other. And so the question is, how do you get together and decide really what you want to do, and then who's responsible? I believe you need to align responsibility and authority. So if somebody says, I'll do it, then they ought to have the authority to make it happen and be held accountable to make it happen. Go ahead. And so part of what we talked about is that we did not see, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, we did not see a local neighborhood organization, what we would call Community Development Corporation. You have the Heritage Center that is protecting the culture and heritage, but we're talking about a CDC that is sophisticated about land, money, and sophisticated deal-making, about that will become the vehicle to drive the development part of this remarkable neighborhood. And that means buying houses and protecting the affordability of some of the houses. It could mean doing a lot of different real estate stuff. I ran a community development corporation like that did millions of dollars worth of real estate development. We partnered with the city, we partnered with foundations, we partnered with a lot of people to make that happen. And when I was mayor of Pittsburgh, we did billions of dollars of development. When I say we didn't do any of the development ourselves. We partnered with both private and nonprofit organizations. Somebody needs to be that entity. That you need an organization, we believe, in this neighborhood to be that entity that interfaces your interests with private developers or nonprofit, or if there's nobody in the marketplace, creating your own development. And with the universities have a particular big play in this. And so that would be an important recommendation. How do you create that community development corporation that's looking out for your interests? You know, when I was mayor, I would have developers come and say, Mayor, we have a great idea for you. And I would say, with all due respect, tell us why it's a great idea for you, and we'll decide whether it's a great idea for us. And if our self-interests come together, we'll figure out how to be a good partner with you to make it happen. But that assumed we knew what we wanted. Right now, you don't know what you want. You're reacting to whatever happens. You don't want to be in that position. And so that's why you need a community development corporation with a clear vision about what it is that you want in terms of the real estate in the footprint of this neighborhood. Go ahead. And so we outline over on the side there sort of an idea of how you would structure this. And so the thing that I learned, you know, and every mayor learns, is you can talk about all this stuff for 5 minutes, but you really need smart people to help you understand how to do the right deal so you don't get your pocket picked. And that's really an important part of this, of how do you build that sophistication. And that's doable. ULI can help you do that in building that kind of sophistication of how you bring the money together, how you make the deals happen that you want to happen. Go ahead. part of what we saw was that it allows universities particularly, there are some great models. Pittsburgh would be one, Philadelphia with the University of Pennsylvania, where they have played a huge partnership role with the neighborhoods around them, because they recognize that they were not going to be a good university if they don't have a nice neighborhood and a place where people want to be. One of the best examples in the country is in Phoenix, where Arizona State University, which is actually in Tempe, which is a suburb of Phoenix, but the president of Arizona State University said, you know, we are never going to be a great university if we're not in a great city. And so we need to invest in Phoenix. And they bought, in cooperation with, and if you were in Phoenix 20 years ago, you know, Phoenix, there was no downtown in Phoenix. It was a lot of one-story sort of auto parts stores and auto repair places. And they bought 20 blocks with the city, ASU. And if you go to Phoenix today, you'll see that they've built 32 buildings. There's probably 25,000 students that are there, completely transform downtown Phoenix. I'm not suggesting you do something like that, but that partnership with universities are really important. There's great examples of how they develop around the country. Go ahead. So the financing, how do you pay for this? And well, right now is a moment in time when there's lots of money. So the three big federal programs, ASU, the American Rescue Funds, it has put millions of dollars in Durham's hands, hundreds of millions of dollars in the county's hands, and billions of dollars in the state hands. And with my experience, I find in lots of cities less than half of that money has been spent. The infrastructure bill has put billions of dollars at play in things that have direct impact on Fayetteville Street and on the highway, on 147, and the ability to transform that. Imagine that buried with a park on top of it of 6 or 7 blocks, and you're going to say, that's never going to happen here. You know, if you go to Dallas, it happened on a major interstate right through the middle of Dallas. Warren Park, it's called. It decks over 6 blocks of an interstate highway in Dallas. You can make this stuff happen. And now is you have the story to tell with the Black Wall Street that was destroyed here, that people would knit back together. And so how you put that money together and how you use it to finance the development it's not one place does it. You create different funds. So you have highway money. Go ahead. You have philanthropic money. You have different new market tax credits, historic tax credits, low income tax credits. You need somebody that understands how to put that together. So the billions of dollars of development we did in Pittsburgh, I would say on the average, most of them had 8 to 10 different sources of financing in them when we figured it out. But we figured it out how to make it work, both for the developer so they would want to come back and do more, and for us because we would get returns and taxes. And so that financing and how you put that together is a very critical part of all this, but the money is available. Go ahead. And so we sort of guesstimated that we believe that within the next 5 years or 7 years that you should be able to see $63 million of new investment in the footprint of this neighborhood. $63 million. And you're going to say, yeah, right. You can do this, and that's the challenge. Do you believe you can do it? You've got to be intentional about it, and the money's there. It's going to go somewhere. The question is whether it will come here into this plan. Finally, let me end. Go ahead. So I'm going to tell you a quick story. My wife and I were in the Peace Corps many years ago, and we lived in Paraguay in a very remote village up the Paraguay River, a 3-day boat ride. And we spoke Spanish, and a few miles through the jungle was Brazil, and they spoke Portuguese, and around us were a variety of Indian tribes who spoke different languages. And what we learned was that the most powerful person in the town wasn't the person with all the guns or all the money. It was the person who spoke all the languages. And when we came back to America, we found that we were equally divided as a society by race, by class, by ethnic origin. If you work in the computer industry, I have no idea what you're talking about most of the time. And the lesson that we really learned was that in America, the people that are the most powerful people are the translators. And I failed many times as a mayor in that, but what that translator can do is to articulate a vision that everybody sees a place for themselves. And that's the challenge you have right now, is that you need translators to communicate a vision that people in this community can see a place for themselves, that they're not going to get driven out, that the university is going to grow and succeed, that you're going to have a street that is comfortable walking down on Fayetteville Street, and it will attract people to want to be there, not get through it as quickly as they can. That the highway is not the barrier, but it knits the community back together. All those things are possible. It's the end of the day, you need a good translator. And what I learned is that at the end of the day, it's not about money. It's not about whether it's too big or too small. We have fights about all that stuff. It fundamentally is about whether we have the community will and the political will to reach for the future. That's your choice. Do you have that community and political will to reach for the future? Kick the door down. Take advantage of where you are and the history that you have. Don't accept no for an answer or later. Do it now because there is an urgency. You don't have time. Good luck. I'll take questions if you want to do that. So that's our panel. I summarized it, but that's the sort of what we suggested. It was so clear to us that you have an opportunity right now. Take advantage of it.
Great.
Thank you, Mayor Bell. I called you Mayor Barr. We used to have a Mayor Barr in Pittsburgh.
Yeah. Tom and I had some conversations about being mayor and some things that were happening in Durham. And when we were doing the part of the tour, we pointed out what was happening at the loss at South Side and told him who the developer was. And Tom, you can explain your connection with that developer also when he's done, McCormick Barron.
Yeah, McCormick Barron did this development down here, and I have to say, I went through it earlier today when I came. It's a nice development, and if this mayor was your representative, Mayor Bell was your representative, he looked out for your interest. It's an attractive entrance. I mean, that fountain and the entrance is an attractive entrance. And I worked with McCormick Barron in Pittsburgh. They did 3 or 4 big developments for us, and I was involved with him in New Orleans also, where they developed the old C.J. Pete public housing community. And so that's the kind of partnership I think we're looking at. But you need to know what you want when you have that conversation. You can't have, McCormick Barron did a good job, I think, from what I see. But you can't have them knowing what they want and you're sort of there not knowing what you want. And that's why getting that room together and all of you in it to develop a vision is so important.
Well, what we wanted to do this evening was first to introduce you to the results of the work that ULI had done. We didn't come here with expecting to have a roadmap that we're getting ready to say the next step we're going to start. We really wanted to give this as sort of a public introduction. And as a part of that, we wanted to receive some type of feedback, if at all possible. And I know you're just seeing it for the first time, and you may not have any questions, but I would hope you might. But what we need to do after we finish this is to really get back together and decide how we want to suggest we might proceed, given the roadmap that ULI has laid out in this report that they have. But right now, I would like to know, are there any questions that persons might have about what you've seen, about any thoughts about what you think the next steps might be for us? Yes, ma'am. Could you just stand out? We don't have a roving microphone, but you can borrow mine.
Hi, I'm Dulcie Davis. I just had a quick question in regard to equity, because I know that there's been a lot of growth in Pittsburgh, but the black community there has declined by 13.9% between 2010 and 2020. And so people are moving out because the cost is going up. And I know that's a huge concern here in Durham in regards to development. I have no doubt that there's going to be growth happening here because it's going to spill over from what's happening downtown. It's just a natural step that people are going to be looking over here for properties. But what are your thoughts around creating equity and also creating opportunity for the people who live in this community and not continue to push people out?
Use this one right here.
We had some successes and failures. Part of what we worked with between the developer and the community is a community benefit agreements. So that, let me give you an example. There was a neighborhood in Pittsburgh called East Liberty that was it was a failed urban renewal project of the 60s. There was an old Sears building there that was vacant, and we acquired it, and we said, what is going to bring both rich people and poor people back to this neighborhood to shop? And we decided it was a Home Depot. There was no Home Depot in the city of Pittsburgh. It was 10 miles out, and this is in the mid-90s. Their motto was to build on an interstate. And so we negotiated with Home Depot to put a store there. It's a long story. They initially laughed at us and said we'd never put a store there. And we did, and part of that was a community benefits agreement with working with a local neighborhood group, the East Liberty Development Corporation, to get and they agreed that we could recruit people from the local neighborhood, run them through sort of a preliminary program, and then send them over to Home Depot, and they'd do their further, and they would train them. And when the store opened, 80% of the people that worked in that Home Depot, 300 or 400 jobs, were walking to work. They were coming from that neighborhood, including the manager, who was a young man who they hired and put him into a couple stores. It was about 18 months. And when the store opened in East Liberty, he came back to run it. So that's the same thing we did at PNC Bank, which is here, proposed a big operations center right in downtown Pittsburgh on an old piece of railroad property that we owned. And we worked with them to partner with them with our largest public housing community. It's called Oak Hill now. And it's 1,700 units, 5,000 people live there. It was at the time we redeveloped a lot of it. It was one of the poorest neighborhoods in not only just the city of Pittsburgh and in the state of Pennsylvania. And PNC began to hire people. We would do training. We would test them and help them get their GED if they didn't have it. And PNC then would hired probably several hundred people from into this operations center. So you can build those relationships, but all that is intentional. I would say there, in some neighborhoods, in the Hill District, which is the August Wilson historic neighborhood of Pittsburgh, and Manchester that I talked about, we focus really hard on doing a mixed income housing, both public housing, affordable housing, and market rate. And I could take you to a McCormick Barron developer up there that now is almost 30 years old, and you would not know the difference. It has to be intentional, and that's part of what I think you face here right now, is that the affordable housing here is going to begin to disappear as people speculate in your neighborhood. And unless you're very intentional about how to keep that affordable housing and to provide the necessary subsidies, it's not going to stay here. So that's the challenge that you have. You're at that moment in time when you need to make a decision. Do we want to keep this neighborhood affordable? And I'm going to say there are places that we didn't do a very good job because it gentrified much quicker than we ever thought. East an example where we, before it gentrified, we built hundreds of subsidized units of housing. So there's housing throughout that neighborhood. So equity ought to be first and foremost part of the conversation for the existing residents.
Thank you, Tom. Are there other questions? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Angel Dozier, and I'll be honest and say that I'm not sure what we've just witnessed here with regard to what a lot of the people who are here already know. With regards to intention, with regards to be done, people who are here have been trying to do these things for a really long time. So my question is somewhat of a piggyback on Dilcy Davis's question with regard to equity. I want to know, with what sort of equitable principles have you made these recommendations? And I'm curious about what other people you all talked to as you were finalizing this report. Because I can say I live in the lofts at Southside. I've been there for several years. There's predatory towing. You can't park in the parking lot if you're visiting there. Management asks us to ask our guests to park on the side of the street where there are 27 no parking signs. The management is done poorly. There are shoddy materials that have made up that development. There's a lot of policing that happens at the pool. It's not open, but it's marketed as a luxury, affordable housing complex with mixed income. What I'm hearing is some of the same old with regards to what these recommendations can be. And so I'm curious about what level with which you all have been able to review these recommendations, the interviews from the people, and with what level have you taken into consideration who has still been missing from the table? Because what I heard here tonight, I've heard so many times. People here in Durham, we know what needs to be done. What we need at this point is, what are we going to be able to do to move forward with an action? That first action that leads to the next action, and it cannot be done at a surface level. It has to go down to the root. It has to go all the way down to the people who live in this community and ones like it. It can't come from the fancy suits. It can't come from the higher up positions. It has to come from the people who live and experience a lack of infrastructure on a daily basis and find ways to survive in a lack of infrastructure. The sidewalks and the crosswalks are not complete. They've been that way for more than 60 years. The traffic lights and the signal boxes don't work in the same way they do across town. I would really recommend that there be more action taken to find out what it is like for the people who don't have the same education level as you, or the same nice and neat haircut as you, and ask them their stories. Because those are the people who have the answers and have always had those answers. So I'm curious about it. This is a rhetorical question. It's definitely going to take some time to think about that. But I want to know, how can we go beyond the surface, down to the root, to really solve this problem? Otherwise, we're going to have the same situation. It's already happening. We're not facing a challenging future. We're in the challenge and have been for a really long time. Thank you.
I would agree with you completely. The question is, are you going to, I mean, are you going to do, somebody going to do that? And that's what we're suggesting, and we suggested a community development corporation that's community controlled to go do it. Or else, if you don't do anything, it's going to continue to you don't stop what's beginning to happen already unless you create a counterforce.
You spoke to exactly what we were hoping to hear this evening. By no stretch of the imagination did we want this to be a top-down situation. We wanted it to be a bottom-up. I don't want to say the people that live in the neighborhoods are at the bottom, but we wanted people who had stakeholders and that were residents that understood the problems to be a part of this process. We didn't come here with the answers. We came here with a possible roadmap. You've got to help fill out the blocks. And, you know, what I hope we get before we leave here, all of you probably received an invitation either through email or I don't know how you got contacted. But I would hope that you would write back and let us know if you're interested in trying to develop the structure to make this stuff come to fruition. It's not going to happen from the top up. It's not by any stretch of the imagination. You've got to have people who have a stake in it, who live here, who understand the problems, to talk about what the problems are, and then all of us try to figure out the solutions to them. So I appreciate your comments. I appreciate you raising the question, but that's exactly what we're looking for. I mean, when we leave here, I mean, I don't live here. I don't live in the neighborhood. I understand it. I mean, my name's on this cornerstone when this structure was done, so I understand what went through in putting this place together. I helped run a community development corporation. We developed a food line down, you know, where it is. It didn't happen overnight. We had to really put things together to bring them into that neighborhood. They didn't want to come in. They count rooftops. You know, where's the money coming from? They wanted security. They wanted all these things. But they just signed up for another 5 years on the lease that we have with them. And it can happen here. If you've got the right people working together, understanding what the problems are, and willing trying to work together to try to find a solution. I do appreciate your comments, and I take it that way. Anita?
Thank you, and thank you for your report. I found a lot of affirmation in what you shared, and I did pick up on some solutions or some recommendations. The CDC, and as simply as it was put, the recommendation about those of us who, like me, are a member of intentional, conscious coalition of citizens working to revitalize, to save Hayti and this corridor. So I don't so much have a question. There are some city officials and others with power to close the gap between persons like myself and others in here who have worked and fought for generations, especially since the expressway, to replace and to redo what was sacrificed. And so I would like to suggest that the positives in your report, the recommendations in your report, and thank you, Mayor Bell, for the invitation to follow up. What I would like to hear and to have made available to those of us who are working to translate for this community, what language do we need to stand in the gap between us and the power brokers? Because as I see it, there is a chasm that exists. Mayor Bell says he affirmed Angel's rhetorical question as being part of the mission here tonight. I am a native of Durham. I am a survivor of one of the business persons who lost when the expressway came through. And I'm currently serving on a coalition, a growing coalition of citizens in Durham who are working to do just what you have suggested, stop the bleeding. So what I believe others would like to know is What is that language? What should be in our letters of follow-up when we come to various meetings and when you said don't let money stop you, but we constantly hear that, okay? So how shall we hold our mouths?
Nita, I'm not doing it. It's about the money too. I mean, anything that you do is going to be about the money. There's no question at all about that. You mentioned about city officials. I think the mayor was on this Zoom. I know several of the city council people were supposed to be a part of this Zoom. You have Deputy City Manager here, Keith Chadwell, and Transportation here. I don't know how many other city people are here, but we want this message to go back to them because they've got to be a part of it. And what I'm suggesting again, if you think that you want to be a part of structuring this venture that we're going to have to put together to make this thing happen, we want to know who it is. And the best way to do it is to email us back. We don't have a definite time frame in terms of when we're going to get back together. I hope it's within the next 2 to 3 weeks because you let things stay out, they just fester and nothing happens. Yes. Exactly. I understand that. We understand that. And just why we are here, the other people that have other plans for this property. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. And you can't stop someone. If I own property, you can't stop me from selling it unless you go give me a better price, a better offer, or some other reason. So that's happening. We understand that. So time is of the essence. So I would hope that within the next 3 weeks or so, we'll be able to get together and try to structure a format that helps us go forward and present that to the appropriate persons who I think will have a task in this. That's the city council, and to a certain extent, the county commissioners.
Also, to connect what Bill is talking about, so the folks from the community who are interested, if you've received the invitation, please respond back to that invitation so that we can loop you in. Because I think to Angel's rhetorical question, the key pieces that we always run into regardless is the money and the technical expertise. And I think you mentioned that as well in regards to knowing what to say, knowing how to navigate the things from a business acumen standpoint. But then also sometimes it's just the access to the network to have someone in your corner who understands that language. So as Bill said, this is not an approach coming in saying we have the answers, we're just presenting. And I know that the community has been educated and under-resourced. And what we want to try to do is figure out ways that we could partner together so we can fill in those gaps from a technical expertise and a capital standpoint. But we have to do that together. So if you are interested, please respond back to the invitation that you received, and then we can start to pull you guys into more of these meetings and have these honest conversations.
We don't want to hold anyone. We started at 6, it's 7 o'clock now, but I don't want to stop any conversations or questions that any of you might have. I know it's cold outside, and we want you going home comfortable in the right way. So let me ask you, are there any other questions or comments that anyone might have relative to what we've heard tonight, or any thoughts you might have to add on to it? Well, if not, again, I want to thank you for taking the time to be here. This is part of the beginning. It's not the end. It's part of the beginning, and we certainly hope that you play an important part in trying to support us. And again, I want to thank ULI for what is it. I'm going to turn it over to you, Madam Mayor, because you got the whole thing. But I just want to thank ULI again for what they've done.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you all. I just want to say, and I'm going to turn the mic back over to Mayor Bell, but this community has had some exceptional and still has some exceptional community organizers, activists, and advocates for their community. There's no shortage of that. You know, Angel's work, Anita's work, the work of so many other people, the work we do here at Hayti. So I think that this is an opportunity that we've planted seeds. Many seeds have been planted over the last 70 years, and now it seems the stars are aligning. As Tom said, there's money out there. We've been working to even identify some of that money. It's going to be in phases, but the idea of not having to deal with that question is exciting to me. When I was approached to sponsor the ULI panel, I did not just readily agree to that. And they can tell you I was reluctant because, as Angel said, and as you all know, we've heard this before. This is a conversation that in and of itself is not new. But I really had to ask a lot of questions and to understand what might possibly come from this that has not come from the other meetings, the other gatherings. So what I'll say is this, we've got a collective of experiences, stories, thoughts, ideas, reactions, responses. We've got everything that we need to put into that bucket, that basket, so that we can create a CDC, so that we can bring in that expertise that I know I don't have, and some of you might, but we need that because we need to go at it, and we need to go after the money. We need to go after that vision, and it has to be a shared vision. We all want to see this community prosper and grow, but there has to be a blow-by-blow shared vision. So that's the opportunity that we all have here, to come together with a shared vision, but to go beyond that while the time is here, and to really develop that entity, that component that can help us get it done. So I just want to say that. It's certainly not anybody telling us what to do. It's all of us saying, this is what we know we want, and this is what it's going to require to bring us the healing and bring us the resolution that we want and need and deserve.
All right. One thing as we move out from here, one thing that I've learned over a few years I've been involved, both publicly and privately, you know what you do best. You know what your skills are. You know what you don't do best. And the success that we've had, whoever we've had it downtown, we realize that. We don't know anything about running a theater called DPAC. We know nothing about. We know how to get the money. We don't know anything about running. So we brought professionals in. The same thing's happening for the baseball park. We don't know anything about running a baseball team, clubhouse. We know how to get the money to build it, but we brought professionals in to do that. And the same thing here. It's going to take others that can come to this table who have the skills that we don't have to make this thing happen. And I think if there's a willingness on your part to make that happen, it can happen. I don't have any question in my mind about that at all. It can happen. It can happen if you got the will to sit down and be patient, because it's not going to happen overnight. It didn't get this way overnight. It's not going to change overnight. But if you got the patience to stick with it, we can make the changes that you want for this community and for a better Durham. Again, thank you for being here. Leave your name, email us, but let us know, because we do want as much participation in this effort as we can get. Thank you. Good night.
Mayors before me was Mayor Barr.
I ain't no problem about that.
No, Mayor Barr. I used to. You were good, because you understand the ball.
At church, you don't come up on the pulpit into the pulpit area. They tell you stay down. How you doing? Good to see you, man. Hey, I heard a lot about you.
I'm doing great. Charles, how you been?
I was on the left side.
Well, again, we got to be a part of the solution. That's a good report we should look at.
There at the university. Not sure.
Oh yeah, no. This is, the urgency is now and figuring out how to assemble. I guess the question to me is 63 million is a real number.
I had to
So how do we? I know. Yeah, no. And so the part of it is, okay, I know there capital team, the expertise to sort of figure out how to leverage? I mean, how to scoop up significant pieces of. Ask a very specific question. So between the ARP money, the infrastructure money, has any of that money been? Right, right. Well, yeah, but again, that's part of that source. That's where we got to start. We just got to have a conversation. Sure, it's a holistic approach. It's hard when you don't trust.
You tell all these young people just walk up yourself, don't need any bounce, don't need any rails, just come.
How you doing, sir?
Okay.
All right. This is my son, Ishmael Montague.
Ish, nice to meet you. Call me Ish.
So, yeah, so John Wayne, every time we come to the event, Mayor Bell, John Wayne, you know, we've been to town together. Did you go to town or anything with John or just? Yeah. We are involved in listening and trying to understand from the business. I like what you said. It's all got to do with money. You can talk about it. But if there's no money with that, the way you Fairfield built the city, the way you was able to do that is by forming strategic partnerships with the QDI, the office complex, all that. Money, the government's right. Wow, really? That's yes, sir. We appreciate everything you do, and I'm just going to stick around. Yes, sir. And I would love to talk to you about, you know, the fan place project. We're moving forward. Trying to figure out how we can work together. Well, I know they put you. Right, right. Right. I know what they do. Right.
Thank